there's nothing that we can do. I don't know what to tell you. Your blood work looks fine, but they're clearly saying they don't feel fine or they don't feel like themselves. And just seeing the sort of one size fits all algorithmic approach of Western medicine made me really uncomfortable because I felt like I was constantly trying to fit a patient in a box based on their symptoms.
This is a podcast called Walk, Talk, Listen. An attempt to connect people and make this world a bit better by sharing opinions and experiences based on the belief that everyone's perspective is true, albeit partial. My name is Maurice and I would like to welcome you to yet another episode of Walk, Talk, Listen.
Okay, good day, everybody. This is another episode of the podcast Walk, Talk, Listen. And as always, I'm delighted with today's guest who will introduce herself. Krysten, please go ahead.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. My name's Krysten. I am originally from Miami, Florida. I was born and raised there, and I happened to meet Maurice a couple of weeks ago at the United Nations, which was a serendipitous union. And yeah, we'll pass it over to him.
Yeah, no, and I you will quickly realize that Krysten has a lot of things to share. I mean, she's a very, how do you say that? An octopus in many ways. There's so many arms and so many things she does. So looking forward to hearing more about that. Before we go there, Krysten, I would like to understand that you're living in Miami now. Were you born and raised there as well? Tell us a bit about your upbringing.
Yeah, I grew up in the suburbs in Miami in a neighborhood called Kendall, specifically West Kendall, very close to the Everglades. Grew up outside in nature. I'm an older sibling. I have a younger sister, and there's a 3-year age gap between us. I am 100% Cuban, like most of Miami at that time, and all my neighbors were Cuban. I grew up basically in Latin America and didn't realize it until I left. And grew up very non-traditionally. I grew up on a farm. My mom always had a passion for having horses. And so I spent a lot of my life outside riding horses, taking care of animals. We had a whole gamut of animals. We had a potbelly pig, goats, ponies. At one point, we had like 8 or 9 horses that we had rescued and were taking care of. So it was an exciting and very non-traditional childhood, very connected to the outdoors and nature.
And everything you do at the moment, that connection between humans and nature, planet, is also very important, right? Um, so not surprising, when we will listen a little bit later what you're doing also at the moment. So you said you're 100% Cuban, but just for folks who don't know the history around this, you were not born in Cuba. You have never been there, right? Tell us a bit about your roots then.
I wasn't born in Cuba. I have actually never been there. My grandparents left Cuba many years ago, right when the Fidel Castro regime was taking over. And they made their way to New Jersey. And then from there, it was too cold. So they headed down to Miami and put roots there. And my mom was born in Jersey. My dad was a young child when he came from Cuba, and they stayed in Miami our whole lives. And yeah, it was a very, very Latin upbringing. If you've ever been to Miami, most people still don't speak English, and it's stayed that way till this day. So it's pretty cool.
Hmm. And do you still have family in Cuba?
I have family over there. I've never met them
Hmm.
since I've never been over there. Over the years, there was some family that like slowly trickled in. Like we had some cousins that came and they've
Hmm.
made roots and have families that live down in Miami as well. But there are family there I've never met.
Okay. So, thanks for sharing, your very, you say that your upbringing, where there's your a lot of things to do, with connected with animals and name it. Then, when you later became to high school, yeah, tell us about, you know, how was that? And ultimately, I know you ended up in New York. So tell us a bit about that particular part of your life.
Yeah, I went to this magnet high school that was close to my house for this program called International Baccalaureate. This IB program allowed me to get college done so that then when I was in college, I had a year already done. So I graduated from undergrad in 3 years because college is expensive and student loans. And I remember when I graduated as a marine biology major, that was what I wanted to do. I love the ocean. And then, the sounds of people who you love telling you that that's not going to make money led me to pursue medicine into PA school in Wake Forest in North Carolina. And after I graduated, I was dating a guy at the time who was a native New Yorker. He was a New York Rican, like they call them.
Mm.
And right before we graduated, we broke up, but I already had a job lined up. So I was like, well, I'm going to take the chance and I'm going to move to New York. If it doesn't work out, Florida will always be there. And so I moved to New York. He helped me find an apartment. I actually never spoke to him again. I'm still in contact with his mom till this day. I love it. And yeah, I ended up staying in New York for almost a decade and just moved back to Florida at the end of January.
Yeah. And what did New York do to you? I
Oh
mean,
man. You know those sayings of like, if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. Yeah, and New York made me and broke me so many times. And I feel like those moments where it broke me, they were like low lows. But from there, the rebuild made me so much stronger because New York, it teaches you how to be independent, how to try to be kind, but still have boundaries, where to show compassion, where to turn the other way. And it makes you tough, like between the weather, the people, the cost of living, it like really molds you into this very resilient type of human. So yeah, I'm grateful to New York for all those moments of growth and challenges that made me stronger.
and you know, you were in New York during a very difficult time during the pandemic as well, right? And then you were still working as a what was your title?
A PA.
The PA. Yes, sorry. So yeah, tell us about that because ultimately you decided not to continue as a PA, right?
I still work virtually as a PA, but
Okay.
I had to sort of disconnect from the in-person aspect, probably because of my job history. When I first moved to New York, I worked with undocumented patients in Corona, Queens at a federal health center, which was truly amazing work, but I was just so burnt out and underpaid by the time that I left and quickly realized why it had such a high revolving door policy. Like after being there for 3 years, I think I was the second longest employee there. So that goes to tell you a lot about the kind of things that you deal with, the bureaucracy, the government. It's a lot. But it was probably one of the most fulfilling jobs that I had in the sense that I was truly changing patients' lives. I was seeing them come back with like improvements in their diabetes, reversal of diabetes, chronic conditions that we see. And then from there, I went to City MD. This was like right when the pandemic started. Yeah, so primary care came to a standstill, and there was really no system of telehealth and all of what we have today in place because the pandemic was something that modern medicine had never really witnessed before. And so, yeah, after a few months of trying virtual care, the patients were just afraid to come in. They were afraid to get COVID. And then, we already had the fears of them being deported. And this was before all this ICE stuff started. And so I was like, it's time for a new chapter. So I went to work at City MD, and City MD during the pandemic was crazy. It was a time to be alive. There was some days that in a 12 or 16-hour shift, I saw over 100 patients. I just remember doing so many nasal swabs, and I felt like a robot just repeating the same thing about things that were going on at the time. Like, were you outside? Were you in contact with somebody more than 15 minutes? in all the patients. And it was just such a, again, high burnout because we're seeing so many people and dealing with so many emotions. Somewhere along the line, I decided helping the asylum seekers coming in illegally from across the border was going to be a better idea for my emotional health.
Mhm.
And that was also super fulfilling. And I felt very privileged to be able to help the Hispanic community and to be able to hear these people's stories and have them open up and share so vulnerably with me. And that was like, it was a very unique job. Like, I don't think
Yeah.
that job will ever come again in this lifetime, which was why I took that job when somebody reached out to me on LinkedIn. But as you can imagine, hearing those stories all day long and dealing with all the trauma unpacking that comes with that is also very emotionally exhausting. And so after that job, that was when I stepped into like true telehealth working remotely because my nervous system was just having a hard
Yeah.
time sustaining all of the energy that I was exposed to all day.
Kristen, what I wanted to, I think that I saw that you wrote somewhere, maybe on your webpage, maybe something else, that you speak about helping people remember their own power to heal. So, what has driven you on that journey from clinical medicine into more holistic, integrative approach?
I love this question. And it's something that I've sat with a long time because one of my biggest frustrations in primary care was feeling like there was nothing else that we could do for people. Yeah, I think running into the same story of seeing patients that said they didn't feel well, that were having XYZ symptoms, and all the blood work coming back normal, and constantly having the conversation of, there's nothing that we can do. I don't know what to tell you. Your blood work looks fine, but they're clearly saying they don't feel fine or they don't feel like themselves. And just seeing the sort of one size fits all algorithmic approach of Western medicine made me really uncomfortable because I felt like I was constantly trying to fit a patient in a box based on their symptoms. But I recognized that every patient has such a different story, such different bloodlines, such different DNA, such different genetics, and not everybody's going to fit in the same box. And so I'm trying to treat somebody's thyroid, but somebody weighs 90 pounds versus somebody weighs 200 pounds, but I'm giving them the same dose of medication. And so I found myself just constantly in this conundrum of like, where does my ethical responsibility lie as a healthcare provider in doing the least amount of harm for a patient? Because I feel like a lot of providers just subscribe unconsciously or subconsciously to this idea that everything is treatable with a pill, but every pill has side effects. And I'm treating your acid reflux with one pill, but now this pill causes osteoporosis, and now you fall and you break a bone. And like, I feel like there's so much more that we could be doing, and there's so many other ways that we can treat things. And so I was already on my spiritual path when I started my medical path, and I feel like they were in parallel for a long time. But there came a point where I was like, I can't unsee what I've already seen, and I already know that the Western approach doesn't always work. So, how do I now fuse these together to actually help people heal instead of just saying, take this pill for the rest of your life and good luck?
And so, yeah, so then what did you do? I mean, you stopped working as a PA and
Yeah, so I took a step back from in-person work.
Mhm.
I actually enrolled in a 3-year herbalism program, and it really allowed me to connect to and the medicine of the plants. And through that, I realized that there was so many ways to heal from a natural perspective without Western pharmaceuticals. And so without pharmaceuticals, there are so many other ways that we can incorporate healing, and from a place of true healing, not just putting a band-aid on something so that when somebody stops taking the pill, they're right back to where they were.
I would like to take it a quick sidestep, because you've worked in very different communities, right? As a PA with patients from Queens, and then to people in healing spaces and retreats. If I understood, I've read this from your website, etc. Right? When you look at younger generations, do you see a shift in how they relate to health, spirituality, and self-care?
Yeah, I think that the generations are having an awakening or realizing that the sort of rat race or consumerist society that many of us were taught to believe is the only way, where you
Hmm.
work a job for 40, 50 years, you get your retirement, and then you retire, is not the only way. And more, I see the younger generations are returning to our ancestry, returning to the indigenous medicines, returning to these more natural solutions for health, and trying to slow down. It's almost like, because our ancestors and the people who came before us were in survival mode and they were on the hamster wheel, and we've watched what that's done to them and their nervous systems, we are unlearning how to do that, obviously with a place of great privilege, to be able to slow down and not create that sort of same nervous system flight mode that we're seeing
Oh,
in the older generations.
okay. And but you then, as a health practitioner, how do you balance then? Because I mean, you mentioned it yourself, right? Western medicines does have certain solutions, but not for everything. So how do you balance, or do you balance, or have you become a total only a herbalist, and you're not doing any pharmaceuticals anymore?
My current job, I'm very
Hmm.
blessed that
Yeah.
it is a job where I found it does the least amount of harm. So I don't have to prescribe pharmaceuticals, which allows me to sleep much better at night.
Uh,
And it's basically, my current job is submitting documentation to insurance companies stating why patients need physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy after they've been hospitalized for a fall, a
uh-huh.
stroke, anything like that. So I don't do so much of like managing chronic conditions. It's more like getting them short-term or long-term home services. So I believe in Western medicine, and I think it has a time and a place, but I think that natural medicine should be the primary domain that we live in, and Western medicine is really only reserved for emergencies, trauma, and things that can't be cured naturally.
Okay. So how do you then, yourself personally, make sense of that connection between mind, body, and spirit?
I think it's all one system, it's all a whole. And it doesn't matter how healthy I am, if I'm running every day and going to the gym and eating all the fruits and vegetables, but I'm not addressing underlying anxiety in my mind. I'm not processing, something that's happened to me in my life. For example, if somebody's passed away and I'm stricken with grief, you can only suppress those emotions for so long before they will start to manifest physically. And this is what science is starting to catch up to. And when we see all of these autoimmune conditions like fibromyalgia, chronic regional pain syndrome, lupus, all of these things that are diagnosis of exclusion, or that they're creating these criteria to again put people in a box so that we can tell them this is your diagnosis. These are all symptoms of trauma that's being stored and manifest in the body. And as uncomfortable as some people feel when we say that to them, I think it's an invitation for them to really explore what's underneath the surface. And that starts with looking within ourselves.
Is that why, you also speak about, that it's important to create spaces where people feel safe and nurturing? And then what does it, if that's the case, what does it really take to people to feel safe enough to heal?
I think it involves facilitators who are holding space with integrity. It's very easy to say this is a safe space, but how do you make people feel that way? And that can only be felt. You could tell somebody 100 times, you're safe, but if they don't feel that way. So the way, in my opinion, that I make people feel safe is by sharing my own humanity and my own vulnerability and bringing back that awareness and that connection that we're all having this human experience together. You know, whatever people, and they say this all the time, a lot of the clients that we're presented with are versions of ourself in some moment of our life. And I see that all the time. And so the people that we tend to work with are people who have gone through something we've gone through or are moving through something we're moving through. And that too is our teaching. Because part of our job as a teacher or a space holder is to recognize that our job learning is never done. We are perpetual students of life. And so to be able to have that humility and that awareness of this is not a place of ego, this is not a place of hierarchy, but we're all here to teach each other and to learn together. That's how I feel I best can create a sense of safety for people who come into programs or sit in any activities that I facilitate.
So if somebody who's listening now, if they feel disconnected from themselves, um, from their body or their purpose, what would be a gentle first step they could take?
I think the gentlest first step is to stop looking for the answers in others or in external things. I think I spent a lot of my journey, and I feel like many people do too, seeking the answer on the outside. And we can do that as long as we want, but the answers are already within us. So, as uncomfortable as it may feel, I always go back to the yogic tradition, which is where I started my spiritual journey of finding stillness, closing my eyes, and taking deep breaths. And it gets to be that simple. In that way, we can feel most connected to ourselves. We can ground down into our body, and we can connect to source or that higher sense of consciousness that people are looking for.
And that spiritual journey, is that something um, that was part of your upbringing, or is that something that you came across later in life?
Uh, my mom is innately very spiritual, but she's started to blossom on her own spiritual journey because of the work my sister and I have started doing. But my spiritual journey actually started I went to my first yoga class when I was working at a gym at University of Miami when I was an undergrad. And I was like, what is this? And I thought it was just like a workout class. And then I got into this super bad car accident it was like the week before Christmas of 2014. And that was the catalyst for my spiritual journey because I went from running marathons and doing CrossFit competitions to sitting down and meditating because I couldn't do all the physical things that I wanted to do. And so that was the start of my spiritual journey.
Okay. And but you can run again?
Yeah, I
Okay.
took many months of physical therapy, and then luckily, the way the universe works, that was also a few months later was when I started PA school. So I was very busy studying all day. And once I graduated from PA school, I was able to like fully start running again.
Okay. Um, Sound seems to play an important role in your life, right? So before I go, because you know I have a question about music, but I would like to talk first about sound. Is there a particular sound that feels like home to you?
Om. Whenever I hear Om in a yoga class or on a recording, there's so, especially like when multiple people are in a room and we all go Om together, that frequency, like I can feel it inside my whole body. And whatever chatter is in the mind, if I'm not fully present, it brings me right back into my center.
Tell us a bit about that sound healing work that you do.
Sound healing is amazing. And believe it or not, there was like 10 years of my life where I didn't sing, I didn't play any instruments. When I was a kid, this is where it's like the return to like our inner child. When I was a kid, I was always singing, and there's home videos of me. I always wanted to be a singer, wherein like I have like a little microphone and like a purple feather boa, and I'm like doing the Macarena. And when I was in middle school, I was in choir. I played bass guitar. I was learning how to play regular guitar. I used to sing in talent shows. And then I don't know, something happened in the quest of becoming an adult. And I just stopped singing. I just completely disconnected from music in that way. I've always listened to a lot of music, but like to sing and create music, I don't know, that light switch just turned off. And then lo and behold, fast forward like 10 or 11 years later, I don't know what happened. Something I just started to sing again. And at that point, I also started to pick up instruments and started learning how to play the drum, rattle. I learned how to play the acoustic guitar about a year ago. So I'm still learning. And it's been a fun journey of surrendering to the process and becoming friends with failure.
The next question that I'm going to ask you is related with sound, very much so. It's a music question. And I always ask my guests, you know, to come up with a piece of music or a song that, for a big part, embodies what you, in this case, Krysten, are about, um, and why you would pick that piece of music or that song.
Hmm. The first one that comes to mind, which has probably been my song since I was a kid, is Colors of the Wind by Pocahontas.
And why?
I think the animism in that song and the belief that everything that we see in this world has a life, has a spirit, has an energy. If we all lived in that way, this world would be a totally different place.
Hmm. Okay. Um, we made a playlist with all the songs that were picked by my guests, and so we will add this song of Pocahontas.
Cool.
So if you go to Spotify, and ultimately I still need to migrate it to YouTube as well, um, because YouTube is better for the musicians. Uh, you know, the musicians that I've interviewed have told me that Spotify is not a great organization and not a great firm. So anyway, if you go now to Spotify and you search for hashtag Walk Talk Listen, you will find all the songs. Pocahontas will be there soon. Well, as soon as you've listened to this episode, you can listen to the song, and it's full of different types of music, from hard rock to jazz to classical. It's really cool, and I'm every time I'm listening, I'm reminded about the enormous privilege that I have by being able to speak with people like you and are telling their stories, and it's pretty amazing. Um, yeah, and if you heard that, that was Kristen's dog. Uh, um, Kristen, we met at the UN, where you were a translator for a couple of people from Guatemala who were participating in the Indigenous Peace Building Summit and the discussions going on there. Um, if you talk about the UN, people also often think about the Sustainable Development Goals, 17 goals that were developed to really work on a world together that should be more sustainable and more just. Now, you know, um, I think the 17 goals are far from perfect. Maybe there are too many. Um, and also the fact is that these 17 goals, we are not reaching them before 2030. We set that goal of 2030. We are on an average of 15 to 17%, like on ending hunger and ending poverty, you name it. Now, a growing group of people have said, one of the reasons that we are not reaching these Sustainable Development Goals is that we are not paying attention to the abilities, skills, and knowledge that you need as an individual as well as a community. So you might need system changes, but you need to do hard work yourself within your community. And as a result, um, they developed the inner development goals and 5 inner development goals: being, thinking, relating, collaborating, and acting. And under those 5 inner development goals, they identified 25 skills like resilience, hope, forgiveness, critical thinking. Um, so, my question to you is, um, your work, I think, is deeply connected to inner transformation. You're looking at things like awareness, balance, resilience yourself. Um, yeah, but what are your thoughts if you hear about the inner development goals, especially in terms of healing? Um, yeah.
I think that these inner development goals are the key. And I think more than anything, like when I'm hearing these inner development goals, I'm thinking of this documentary that's based on this book called The Blue Zones. In these
Yes.
cultures where people are living in these blue zones, you can see that these people have a lot of these inner development goals that they're practicing every day. And I think one of the most important things that we can do is continue to relate with each other in a society, in a time where people feel more alone and isolated, even though we're more plugged in and connected than ever thanks to technology. I think if we really focus our attention on cultivating deep and meaningful relationships with people, that's not based on technology, that's based on in person, that's based on helping your neighbor, that's based on taking care of the elderly, protecting the children, a lot of these inner development goals will happen organically, I think.
Okay. If I listen to you, you're also talking about connection and connecting of people. That's what I hope this podcast is contributing to as well. That I'm connecting people. You and I are connected, connect you with the listeners. I'm going to connect you with the previous guest because the previous guest has a question for you.
So my question is, in a world that often feels divided, where do you personally find the courage to stay engaged?
Mm. Yeah, that's a very good segue from what I was just saying. I think it's no matter how uncomfortable it feels, it's having conversations with people. It's having those moments of humanity with each other. It could be as simple as helping somebody cross the street. It could be seeing somebody in a rush at the grocery store and letting them go ahead of you if you're not in a hurry. Just being better humans. And I think that by doing that and by showing that we still care about each other, that's how we conquer these false senses of division that systems are trying to create. Because despite everything that's happening in the news and everything that you see in the media outlets, when I really look in the mundane, there's so much magic happening in the exchange with the cashier, in the exchange with, going to a daycare center. I remember this Christmas I went and sang Christmas carols at an elderly center for like people with disabilities. And it was so beautiful. I was trying not to cry the whole time. And when we connect in that way to our humanity, that we're all in this together, that nobody is better than somebody, and that we're all walking each other home, that's how we cultivate a sense of true unity and connection.
Kristen, um, yeah, let me connect you with the next guest. What is your question for the next guest?
What steps can I take to create the world that I want to see?
You speak often about gratitude and connection as part of healing. Um, I have a question often that I ask my guests about. Now I forgot his name. Um, Something Hartman. He was working for CBS or still is. And anyway, he was searching for um, one simple act of kindness and the potential to create a ripple effect. And he made videos around it. So I have two questions about one simple act of kindness for you. One is, what do you think about um, the potential of one simple act of kindness in creating a ripple effect? And the second part of the question is, if I ask you to come up with one simple act of kindness today, what would you do?
Yeah, it is a ripple effect, and it starts with us. And I think a simple act of kindness really does create a wave of change. And one of the easiest ways that I've found to do that from many of my hats that I wear is to just listen to people. When people feel like you're truly listening to them and I'm not waiting to respond, and I'm not just listening to say something to fill the gap. I found that some of the most meaningful conversations I've had have just been sitting in silence, holding space, allowing somebody to feel seen and heard. And this is especially true for the elderly. So I think my acts of kindness tend to favor the elderly because I feel like in our society, they're often very isolated and alone. And so, like with my grandma, I visit her every day, even if I just go sit there for 10, 15 minutes and just enjoy the space with her. Sometimes we cook together. Sometimes I'll take her. Yesterday, I took her to go grocery shopping. So, but just making them feel like someone remembers them, like someone cares about them. When you see an elderly person at the store, I smile at them or I'll give them a compliment. Like, I love seeing women and being like, your shirt is so beautiful. And they're like, thank you. And they're like so shocked because I feel like a lot of times they feel invisible. And so, one of the greatest acts of kindness that we can give society is to make these elders, these wisdom keepers, feel seen, feel like they still matter and that they have a voice.
This podcast is not a is really audio, right? And what people should have seen this conversation that we are having today. And just for the listeners, we have a lot of audio challenges. So Krysten fades out, and then I have to repeat the last thing I heard, and then she picks up there. So we are definitely listening to each other. Otherwise, it would be an impossible conversation. So I'm really grateful for your patience and with this recording today, Krysten. Um, you know, is going back to healing, because I'm fascinated with all the things you do. Is healing something we do or something we allow?
I think it's both. I can speak to it's something that we do physically. For example, when I was in Bali a couple months ago, I fell off of a scooter and I tore a ligament in my ankle and my knee. And I'm still just living my life, just walking and doing things normally. And I'm watching the healing happen on its own. But I think when it comes to the emotional, the spiritual, the mental, we have to allow it. And I think a lot of people are afraid to sit and feel, to sit and cry, to sit and be angry and deal with all the emotions that can arise when we truly look at whatever it is that's happened to us or is happening to us. So I think it's both.
Hmm. Is it true that I observed that you have a lot of connection with indigenous people around the world?
I have worked with many indigenous elders.
Mm-hmm.
My primary teachers are Maya Sutuhil and Maya Quiche, which is how I met you.
Uh-huh.
And they reside in Lake Atitlan in Guatemala, as we call it, because Guatemala in Spanish has a negative connotation. And they are such expert healers and have so much wisdom to share just with simple practices, connecting to the fire, connecting with your own spirituality, and connecting to the earth as this living being that have truly transformed my life.
And you go there on a regular basis. How are you in contact with them then?
Yeah, I go to there. It didn't start out this way, but it turns out that now I go there several times a year and I lead some retreats there as well with the families that I work with to bring people there and be the bridge, be the translator, and be the person who's bringing the people to receive the healing that they need.
Okay. Yeah, these conversations always go fast. It may be two questions from my side still. Um, yeah, 10 years from now, where will you be?
I love these questions. I have no idea. I have no clue. I try to live in the present and nothing is promised and nothing is guaranteed. So I've learned to just make the most of the present moment and surrender to the flow of life.
Okay. Um, yeah, and the last question is maybe, which question should I have asked you but didn't as yet?
You know, I really don't know. I feel like I do so much that I forget some of the tools that are even in my toolkit until somebody will ask me, "Do you do this?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's right, I do that." So, yeah, I think I have a lot of tools in my toolkit and sometimes some get dusty and then I bring them out again and then some other ones get dusty. And so it's constantly a process of connecting to all the knowledge that's already within. And I just trust that I will meet people in the right time that need whatever tools I have, and that'll encourage me to step up and be of service in that way.
Kristen, thank you so much for the conversation, for your willingness to talk with me today, for who you are and what you do, and all the best with everything. Thank
Thank
you
you
so
so
much.
much. Thank you so much for having me and for your patience with the technical difficulties.
That no, this was that was good. It was part of the exercise, I think. So thank you and take care.
Thank you for listening to Walk, Talk, Listen. Please check us out on 100mile.org or follow us on Facebook or Instagram.